Good morning YouTube and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we bring out the Clio 172 Cup. It's been a while since it's featured on the channel and we are going to Cadwell Park for a track day in a couple of weeks. But before that happens, I do need to do some preparation work to the car. So the first job is going to be the oil service. It's not actually due on the mileage at the moment, it is actually the age, because it's come up to almost 3 years since I changed it, but it has only done 1,700 miles in that time. So I've done a full guide on this for you guys at home. It is following at your own risk, but hopefully it helps a few of you out. So I've got to say a big thanks to Renault Parts Direct. They haven't sponsored this video or the car or the channel in fact ever, but I ordered the parts on the Thursday morning. They arrived on the Friday, brilliant service, and I'll link in the description from where you can get the bits if you want to carry out the service using them as well. And as I say, can't complain, got them the next day, everything all went to plan, which is a bit unusual with an old car. And that's something that in this video, I'll put a link now to where you can just go straight to the guide, but I noticed that especially over the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 drives when I've been working on the car, looking around it, she's getting a little bit tired. 20 years old now, 133,000 miles. When I was jacking it up, starting to see a bit of surface rust on there. So I think the next series on the Clio is actually going to be getting it up in the air, stripping all the rear beam off and dropping the subframe. I was obviously going to put all the 197 cams in for those that followed the time when we went to Engine Dynamics and we had the car all calibrated, but I think I'm going to need to do some TLC before we go down that route. So it's been 3 or 4 months since I've been in here. Look at the dust on the dash, needs a good clean. So this is going to be for my friend Andy. Is she going to fire? So first thing I'll do, prime the pump, check it's in neutral, give it a couple of, there we go, I can hear the pump going. Oh, got fuel in it, touch. That's probably when it was about £1.40 a litre opposed to remortgaging your house. Right, moment of truth. Oh, look at that. Little rattle from the solid shifter there, but on the button. With the car safely jacked up, you can now begin working on removing the oil filter and draining the oil. Now on my engine bay, as you might see here, it's probably different to yours at home. It's because I've got an RS2 intake manifold on there. So on the standard car, your inlet manifold would run up, over the top, and in the front here, there'll be a big block, a fuel rail guard, and there's two 10mm nuts in that. You undo those, slide the rail off, and you've got lovely access. Now what I haven't got here, see if you can see it there, if I can point to it, basically in there is the blue Renault oil filter that I've got to remove, and I've got to get my hand through that gap on the RS2. But on a normal car, once you've got that fuel rail guard off, there's plenty of room. So we'll get some oil pliers on there, crack that off just to make sure it loosens off properly, and then we'll put a drain tub under there. Now you must put the drain tub under there before you remove that, because unfortunately the way it's designed, when you unwind that, all the oil drips down the front of the block, and if you've got a nice block paved driveway like I have, it makes an absolute mess. So we'll get the drain tray out, get the sump drained, remove the oil filter, and then the oil change will be underway. As mentioned, you're going to need a large oil drain tray. As I've got here, it's a large size one, allows you to catch everything, especially when we remove the oil filter. I've got a set of Halford's oil filter pliers. You can use other big grips, vice grips, but these are nice. They get into the angle and allow you to easily grate the filter off. And then I've got an 8mm square key to do the sump plug, and it's quite straightforward. And it's got an adapter. It lets it slide in there so that we can crack it off. Now underneath the car you can see the sump, and the first drain key on your left hand side is the one for the engine. Do not undo the one to the right, because this will be for your gearbox oil. So as I mentioned, it's that 8mm key, as you can probably also see there. Nice sweaty gearbox, good old Renault, notorious for leaking out the selector arm. But as I say, it's still holding fluid. It's not horrific, but it does weep a bit, especially when it gets really hot. You can get a bit of misting around there. But like I say, we're going to undo this one today. We're going to move the drain tray so that the sump point is at the back of the drain tray, and at the front, everything from the oil filter, when it's undone, will just drip down there and stop it going all over the driveway. Or at least that's the plan anyway. One final thing to add before undoing the drain plug is I normally leave the engine running for about 10 minutes just to make sure there's a bit of heat in there, especially if it's cold outside. It just makes sure everything drains nicely, and like I say, make sure you switch the car back off, and now you can drain the oil. So with the oil filter removed, as you can see, the grips ended up taking quite a crush on there. I would have said which arsehole put that on last, but it was me, so obviously did it a little bit too tight. But the main thing to check for is you've got the O-ring seal on there, because if that's still on the block and you put the new one on, you're going to get a horrific leak. And then the other thing to check on the sump plug is that the washer has also come off, because we will be replacing that. But again, if it's still stuck to the sump, you put the new washer and sump on, do it up, you're likely to get a leak. But yeah, other than that, the RS2 makes it a bit fiddly to get in there. And you can see we've got a bit of oil in there, and this is what runs down the front. I'll try and get the camera to zoom in on that. So what I'll use is just some brake and clutch cleaner once it's all back together, just to blow all that away. So laying your new filter side by side with the old one. I'll put the part number in there as well for if it helps anyone. Take a bit of oil, mine's still quite clean on there, and just put it on the new O-ring. And the reason for that is if it's dry, it can end up pinching as you screw it on, and again, you'll fire it up, you'll have an oil pressure issue, potential leak. So you don't need to put a lot on there, just a smear, just to make sure it's nicely lubricated when you wind it on. So with the oil filter screwed back in, you can see just down there,
you only tighten it hand tight, so I go as far as you can till it stops, and then I give it another quarter of a turn. Basically, you shouldn't need more than one hand tightening that up. If you start going more, you can actually end up damaging the oil filter, and like you saw with mine, they can become difficult even to remove when they're tight like that. So the final step, just some brake cleaner. That way any old oil should be running now off down into the drip tray, as you can see there, splashing away, and it'll avoid tons of smoke when we start it up. So the next step is optional. Before I put the sump plug and the new washer back in, I'm actually going to jack the rear of the car, and the reason for that is I'm going to be taking the wheels off to do the brakes anyway, and this will allow the sump to centralise and let all that oil come out. Now on to putting the new sump washer back in. So I've cleaned up the sump plug, which is reusable. This is the old sump washer. As you can see, it's stained. It doesn't actually look in too bad in it, but you can see the seals started to split, so it's no good. And then we've got the brand new one, and then you're just going to clean the bottom of the sump quickly, put the new washer on there, and then it's going to be a case of torquing it up to 20 Newton meters. The Clio 172182 uses 5W40 weight oil. Now, there are various grades out there. I just stick with the Renault recommendation. For me, it's always worked. This motor's done 133,000 miles on it. It uses just under 5 litres with a filter change. It's about 4.7 without the filter. So I'm going to pour pretty much that whole bottle in there, and like I say, then check on the dipstick. With the 5 litres put in, it's just a case of doing the filler cap back up and quickly checking that you've got nothing leaking underneath. The final step now is just to check the dipstick, and because it hasn't been fired up, it is going to overread slightly. It is hard to see with the RS2 on there. See the orange handle, you just pull that out, wipe it clean, check your oil level. Should be just above the maximum. Put it back in, fire it up, give it a minute or two, make sure the oil pressure light goes out, and then, like I say, check the level again, and you're done. Another small job to tick off the list is refit the towing eye. For those that watched the 46 M3 video, oh dear, at Anglesey when I forgot to bring the tow hook with me, a bit of a nightmare. So I'm not going to make that mistake this time. We'll get the tow hook in as well. It's been painted before, but it does the job. It looks all right. Previous owner painted it some sort of blue. I think it was stainless underneath. What do you guys reckon? Should I do like a TRW tow strap, the little tongue that comes out the front, as it is proper race car? So I also need to do a brake fluid change now. It's coming up. Well, it's actually overdue on age by a year, unfortunately. I haven't done a lot of miles, but I'm going to run with the ATE Type 200 brake fluid. It's cheap enough, really. I mean, I think a litre's about 15-20 pounds. Works really well on track. Again, run it in the E46, have done in my cars. Fortunately for me, I've got a bleeding kit that runs off the airline, so as you'll see, it's quite straightforward. You can bleed brakes with 2 people without any real specialist tools, but it's a bit of a ball ache running backwards and forwards, pumping the brake, crapping the nipple off. But in this situation, nice and easy, one-man job. All you've got to be careful of is you've got your brake reservoir here. You just simply unplug the leveling sensor, undo the cap, and you just got to be careful not to get any contaminants in there, and also avoid doing it when the engine's hot, because the 172 182 does have a very small bleed nipple. It's a 7mm, and it easily shears off, especially if it's either been over tightened or not removed in a long time. Now, something that can help is using a small impact gun. So I've got a 6-sided socket on there. Obviously never do it up, it's just for slowly reducing the torque that's in there when you try and undo it. So I use this, and it's been very successful for me over the years, even when I worked on them. Whereas you see a lot of these, when you come to work on them, they're sheared off or they're rounded off, because people use a small spanner like that, and as soon as they're furred up in rust and you try and put any leverage on them, they do round off. So I find a 6-sided, like I say, with a little bit of impact, so it reduces the chance of it shearing, always seems to get them off.
So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you hit that like and consider subscribing. So as I said, the next journey for the little Clio 172 Cup is Cadwell Park. So the mini Nürburgring of the UK as it's known. Super excited, a track I've wanted to do for a long time.